آله وصحبه أجمعين. الله أكبر ولله الحمد. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما واجعل تفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل فينا ولا منا شقيا ولا محروما. اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. So inshallah, we'll get started. If I can just trouble somebody, maybe just to close the door, if that's okay. Jazakallah khair. So welcome to the first class of Uloom al-Quran. This is an introductory course for Uloom al-Quran, or the sciences of the Quran. It's actually the third time we hold it, and it's probably the last time for a while, because the next course will be an advanced Uloom al-Quran course, inshallah ta'ala. So if you're planning to attend that one, this is a prerequisite. So I hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from you your presence and commitment to your deen, and particularly to the Quran. We're just waiting for the screen to show up, but in the meantime, maybe we'll just get started with the kind of the housekeeping items for the course. So who's here taking their first IDA course? Okay, very good. So I'm not going to talk too much about the IDA, or the Imam Development Academy. It's been running for about 3 years, and there's a list of courses that you can take at different levels. MashaAllah, it's a great opportunity to learn and have access to kind of more formal education. Inshallah ta'ala, the goal is to eventually have the IDA kind of certified academic institution. So that's the goal, inshallah. So if you are here, you're more than welcome to sign up as a credit student. If you haven't done so, you will get credit as an IDA student. If you're just here to learn and you don't want to necessarily be a credit and you just want to audit and listen, there is no problem whatsoever. You're more than welcome to. I will emphasize the difference between credit and audit students for the class, so that everybody knows the expectations. Now, don't be, try to push yourself. Don't be like, I've had students in the past where they sign up as credit, and then, halfway through the semester, things start to get busy at school or work, etc. And say, you know what, can I change from credit to audit, right? It's good to push yourself. It's good to keep, if you take it as credit, then you have accountability to yourself. And you push yourself so that you're not just sitting here kind of more passively learning, you're actively engaging in your learning, and you're assessing how well you're learning through the assignments and the examinations. Jazakallah khair, barakallah feek. Before we start, we will renew our intention of why we are here. And I'm not gonna do this every week, just because we're already late after Isha, and we just had a khatira anyway. But I just wanted to kind of take a step back and ask yourself why you're here, right? For what reason? And you want to be rewarded for why you're here. And the best of rewards is that of learning of the Quran. There are a number of hadiths. I share one here. عن أنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن لله أهلين من الناس قالوا يا رسول الله من هم قال أهل القرآن هم أهل القرآن أهل الله وخاصته. And this is a beautiful hadith that Anas ibn Malik narrates that the Prophet ﷺ said, indeed Allah has His own people, His chosen people amongst humanity. And so the Sahaba asked the Prophet ﷺ, who are them? Who are they, Ya Rasulullah? And he said, ﷺ, they are the people of the Quran. They are the people of the Quran, the people of Allah, and His chosen ones. And so the elevation of the human being above creation is something that Allah described to us in the Quran. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ وَحَمَلْنَاهُمْ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ وَرَزَقْنَاهُمْ مِنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَفَضَّلْنَاهُمْ عَلَى كَثِيرٍ مِّمَّنْ خَلَقْنَا تَفْضِيلًا. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has honored humans above all other creation. So already as a human we are honored. But not only that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala selected us to be guided versus many other people who aren't. He gave us Islam, the biggest blessing that we could have. And so that's an honor above the honor of being a human. But not only Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's a lot of people that have testified that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is their only God, and that Prophet Muhammad is his messenger. But a lot of them are also not actively engaging in their deen or practicing their deen. And so the fact that we are here, that is also Allah has honored us and selected us amongst those to be of those who are at least practicing. But not only that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of those who are practicing, allowed us to come to Isha, to come to His house. As we heard after the khatira with the hadith of how beloved the houses of Allah are, that He honors somebody by granting them a house in Jannah for building it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen us amongst even those who practice by being in the masjid to worship Him. And of course, now that we are learning the Quran, this is the tafdeel amongst all humans, and that is learning the Quran. So when you come here, inshallah ta'ala, take a few seconds to think that I'm coming here because I want to be of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's chosen people. We hear a lot about chosen people these days, right? This is and it's not something that you have rights to because you were born a certain way. This is because you chose Allah's book. So when you choose Allah's book, Allah chooses you. And so this doesn't become an activity. This becomes an identity. If you're the people of Allah, now you have an identity. And so the relationship with the Quran is extremely important. So take care of it, inshallah ta'ala, and take advantage of the halaqat of the Quran, whether they're memorizing, reading, tafsir of Sheikh Adnan's that happens every weekend, or simply engaging in just learning more about the Quran. And this is what the course is really about. So Uloom al-Quran, or the sciences of the Quran, is an umbrella term for various disciplines of study that relate to the Quran. And there's many topics around this umbrella term. So the recitation of the Quran, you've heard about the qira'at, the different qira'at or modes of recitation, the history, the compilation, the preservation, understanding or tafsir, implementation, and so on and so forth. And so this class is meant to give an intro to this field within Islam, particularly pertaining to anything related to the Quran from a sciences perspective is covered in this class. This is an intro class, so we talk about and I'll show you the list of topics, the fundamentals, and we'll talk about why we need to learn them, because that's important. And then inshallah ta'ala we will have discussions throughout. The schedule is for Thursdays, just like we're doing tonight, after Isha. We are strapped on time because I don't like late classes. I don't think anybody does. There are people that are limited, especially if they're taking public transportation. And so I'm going to try to make it short. I'm not going to go beyond 10 today. An hour I think is as short as I can cut it, because there's so much to cover in about 11 or 12 classes. And so inshallah, as Isha moves forward, it'll be easier to kind of cover more material and finish before 10. We'll be here inshallah in the main hall. The references for the class, there are two. If you read and understand Arabic, we have Uloom al-Quran, Dr. Nuruddin Itr. So physical copies are here. You're more than welcome to sign one out. I mean, you can keep it. If you just let me know what your name is when you do so. The IDA is not asking for a cost for this, but I'm encouraging you to support the IDA and give whatever you can when you take one of these. You don't have to, but it's inshallah, it allows for sustainability of the program. There's also an English text. It's very basic. And so the class is meant The class is meant to cover a little bit more than that, but it's helpful. We'll assign some readings from both Arabic and English. That book is called Uloom al-Quran by Ahmed van Denver. It's available online for free, so you can access it. I'll send the link, inshallah, or somebody from our admin, inshallah, will send it, and you'll have access to it as well. Can I just get a general show of hands of who's going to be interested in the Arabic text? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sisters. So 5. Okay, that's no problem. We have enough copies. I just want to make sure we don't have to order more. So that'll be available to you, inshallah. So the expected, the expectations and responsibilities that I alluded to earlier. If you're either credit or audit student, come to class on time. Stay for the entire duration of the class, inshallah. I mean, it's only about an hour or so. Try to participate in the class. We've had discussions. They're very fruitful, and sometimes we learn more from the discussions than simply just kind of the lecturing. And do take notes. Do take notes, because you will forget. I will tell you, I'm the type that if I don't take notes, next week I won't remember anything. Okay? And it's valuable because you look back years later, especially when you want to refresh your memory or teach it to somebody like your children or your siblings or your friends. You have access to the material because you've learned it and taken good notes. So take, inshallah, good notes. It's for your benefit. If you're just taking it as a credit, so if you're taking it as a credit, you will have responsibility of readings and assigned homework, as well as the assessments. We have 2, midterm and a final. And please make sure you read all email communications or messages that are sent and respond if necessary. Sometimes halfway through the class we have one-on-ones that we allow to book, so that if you have any concerns, any feedback, or any questions, I will do my best, inshallah, to answer and adjust. Okay. Any questions so far on the kind of the housekeeping side of things? Okay. All right, so let's get started, inshallah ta'ala. So, from the beginning of life, the story of Sayyidina Adam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we all know the story of what happened with Sayyidina Adam when he had an interaction with Iblis, and he ate from the tree, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically sent him to earth. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that, in this ayah shown here in Surah Al-Baqarah, قُلْنَا اهْبِطُوا مِنْهَا جَمِيعًا, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded Sayyidina Adam and his spouse, as well as Iblis, to descend. He said subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَإِمَّا يَأْتِيَنَّكُم مِّنِّي هُدًى فَمَنْ تَبِعَ هُدَايَ فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Whoever, so if there's guidance that comes from me, whoever follows it, there will be no fear for them, nor will they grieve. Right off the bat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala signaled that there's going to be guidance. And that guidance is going to come from the beginning of time of humanity. And that is going to come in different shapes, forms, and sizes. Right? We know that there's messages that were sent to prophets that were limited in scope, and prophets that were bigger in scope, and particularly, of course, Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ, whose scope will encompass our time until the Day of Judgment. And so the guidance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent, some of it is actually, not all of it's through prophets, but certainly the ones through prophets are more formal ways of communicating to humanity. لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْمِيزَانَ لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, we have sent down our messengers with clear proofs. بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ. And we sent down with them the scriptures, or the scripture. وَالْمِيزَانَ. And the balance of justice. لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. So that people establish justice. So people establish justice. And this is the practice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has utilized from Sayyidina Adam, after Sayyidina Adam, all the way to our time. That prophets come with these messages. So let's do a quick kind of, maybe just quick question and answer. So can somebody tell me some of these scriptures that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent down? Give me one. Yes. Al-Injil. What was the Injil passed to, or sent with? Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. Very good. What else? Torah. Who was that sent to? Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. Very good. Yes. Zabur. Who is that for? Dawood alayhi salam. Jazakallah khair. What else? Yes. Yeah, very good. Suhuf Ibrahim. Very good. Excellent, mashallah. Can somebody give me one more? Yes. The Quran. Jazakallah khair. Who is that sent to? Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It's good to, I was trying to get you to say sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, so alayhi salatu wasalam. So the Quran was, or the messages of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were sent in different to different prophets in different forms, in different scriptures. Now, very quickly, I will highlight that, and this is just to kind of emphasize the Quran. What were the people of Sayyidina Musa at his time? What was the time known for? What was like, if you did this, you are like in the top of society. You are like Hollywood. Yes. Magic, right? Magic. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam the ability to actually not just do magic, but change things live, right? So magic is the appearance of things. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the magicians when they faced off against Sayyidina Musa, Allah describes it as saharu a'yun nas. Right? Saharu is that they made it look to the eyes of people that these sticks that they threw are snakes when they were just moving. It was made appeared to people that they were snakes. It wasn't real though. What was real is when Sayyidina Musa threw his staff and it turned into a real snake. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came with something that at the time people appreciated. And those who practiced were the top of society. So Allah sent them that language. He spoke, that message came in their language. So they understand there's somebody greater than you. There's somebody who can do things that you can't do. And that is the miracle. And when people see miracles, there's no way to justify miracles but to say, this is the miracle, we believe in whoever sent this miracle. And that was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What about Sayyidina Isa? Yes. So medicine, yes. So healing the sick, people with leprosy, actually even raising the dead, right? So it has to do with basically life and health. And so that was the time when you know, if you're engaged in such business, you were the top of society. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Sayyidina Isa, and he not only healed the sick, he basically raised the dead by the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Very good. What about, let me pick another one before we move to the last one. What about Thamud? What were they known for at the time? That's a tougher one, right? Yes. Yes, they carved mountains. They carved dwellings and palaces and castles out of mountains. Now, if you just imagine that feat without the equipment we have access to today, right? To do that is extremely impressive, right? And so they were وَكَانُوا يَنْحِتُونَ مِنَ الْجِبَالِ بُيُوتًا, right? They used to carve homes and dwellings in mountains, and they were very powerful. And so when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent them who, by the way? Salih alayhi salam. What was Salih's miracle? What was the language that they spoke that Sayyidina Salih came with something bigger? What was that thing he came with? Al-Naqa, the she-camel. The she-camel was actually from a boulder on the mountain. So if people were looking at the mountain and saying, look at how much we can carve, Sayyidina Salih alayhi salam came and with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turned a boulder, an innate object, into a live object, a creation. And so he spoke in their language. They thought they were the best at this, and look what came. Life came from it. Something they couldn't do, of course. So the messages come to the people in their language. And so now we move to the Quran. What was the language of the people of Quraysh at the time? If you were doing it, you were the top of society. Poetry, right? Actually, the Kaaba at the time of Quraysh had basically the best poems that were written by the poets at the time. The top poets are displayed on the Kaaba. They had the 7 famous poems on the Kaaba. It's a sign of basically, the fact that you get your poem on the Kaaba, you're the best of the best, and you're honored at that time. So the Prophet ﷺ was sent, and he was not only and so the miracle, which we'll talk about, is the Quran. The other part of that miracle is that the Prophet ﷺ was unlettered. And sometimes we talk about unlettered, separate from obviously the ijaz and the miraculous nature of the Quran. But if you have to put them together, think about that. Somebody unlettered with the divine scripture, something that can't be produced by anybody, even if you are educated from the best institutions in the world. Somebody who can't read or write is coming with this document, right? And this, of course, is the Quran. So this was different than obviously the poems, to the point where even the people of Quraysh, when they were around the Kaaba and the Prophet ﷺ would read, they were disbelievers. When the Prophet ﷺ would come across an ayah of sujood, they would actually prostrate in sujood. They didn't believe in the Prophet ﷺ, but it was that mesmerizing that it captured them, that they were, when you get into that zone, whether you're studying something or reading something, you're just so into it, they became so captured, so into it, that when it actually ordered them to make sujood, they made sujood. And that's the power of the Quran. And this is the i'jaz of the Quran, which is, by the way, one of the topics of Uloom al-Quran. So this is just to show that the language that the messages that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to people are in their language. And there's a continuity to that message. All prophets came with the same basic message. There are different forms, there's different shara for each prophet, there's different rules of engagement, but the basic message of La ilaha illallah, the accountability, the day of judgment, etc., that all was the same message over the entirety of humanity. And so the Quran came to basically be the seal of that message. All right. So let's get into the topic of Uloom al-Quran now that we talked about the Quran. Now this is, as I mentioned, is a vast field of Islamic scholarship. It encompasses many different topics within that umbrella term. So recitation as another kind of broad area underneath. So the science of pronunciation, so basically tajweed, the methodology of recitation, the qira'at, the etiquettes of recitation, moving to history, talking about the stages of revelation, the compilation, how it was preserved, even the art and the history of writing, the script. Right now, if you pick up any mushaf and you go to page 22 and go to the second line and the second word, most masahif are the same. Why is it? Because it's the same print. Well, what about the print? How did print evolve over time? We will cover that too, inshallah ta'ala. Understanding and implementation, of course, things like what are the causes of revelation for certain ayats? Because certain ayat in the Quran were revealed because something happened, there was an incident. We cover Mekki versus Madani. These are very crucial when you're looking at tafsir and understanding the ayah. How many of us ask ourselves, before we even try to engage with the ayah or the meanings of it, is this a Meccan ayah or is it a Madani ayah? Because that's important. So we'll talk about that too, inshallah. The forms of revelation, abrogation, which is a topic that is actually, I think, probably misunderstood, and actually maybe in some cases not understood at all. We'll cover that too, inshallah ta'ala. The classification of ayat or verses, the interpretation, and so on. So I will do my best, inshallah, within about 11 classes after today to cover these topics in some capacity. Just also know that we are going to be focusing on generally accepted scholarly opinions. The topics where there are diverse or differences of opinion, that we will leave likely to the advanced class, okay? Because, I mean, this is, again, it's an introductory level, and most topics don't have a lot of, kind of varying opinions within them, but we will cover them inshallah ta'ala, and if there are differences that I think we need to highlight, we will briefly touch upon them. Okay. There we go. So here are the topics that we're going to be covering. I kind of already mentioned them. We'll go into more detail with all of them, inshallah ta'ala, through these 12 topics. Today, inshallah, we will be focusing on the intro, the history and benefits of studying Uloom al-Quran. And if we have time, we'll start to talk about item 2, which is the Quran, its linguistic meaning, description, and names. Okay? Any questions so far? Am I moving too fast? Yes. You could still sign up, inshallah. Yes, you can. We will open registration until next week, inshallah. Okay? Because some people just probably find out about it today, just by merely just praying Isha, or some people may just want to see what it's all about before I commit, which is completely fine, inshallah. You'll have till next week. Okay. All right. So let's talk about. We talked about the Uloom al-Quran as an umbrella term. We'll go into detail on how it was developed as a science, but first we'll cover why it's important to learn it. What are the benefits? First is to realize that there's a wealth of knowledge that exists about the Quran with regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's book. And as they say, true knowledge is to know one's ignorance, right? So only when a person realizes what they don't know, they will start to appreciate how little they know. Better understanding and proper interpretation of the Quran. Now, once you learn some of these, again, fundamental principles, particularly when we focus on tafsir, on qira'at, and madani, Makki, etc., you'll start to gain a better understanding of the context. And that context is very important to understanding and interpreting the Quran. Now, I also want to be clear, we're not going to be covering the qira'at, i.e. learning the qira'at and how to read the Quran with the qira'at. We're learning the qira'at as a topic. What are the qira'at? Where did they come from? How did they come to be? Okay? But the actual qira'at, into going to Hafs and Asim versus Qalun versus Warsh, etc., we're not going to do that extensively. I'll show some examples, but this is more of a understanding what the topics are and what they entail. This is very important, is to increase your knowledge and learn about your deen. That goes without saying. The one that actually, especially if you're younger in university, to protect one's deen and defend Islam from enemies. When I was actually in university many moons ago, actually had an incident where somebody who was non-Muslim was saying things about the Quran that were not actually true. And the people around did not defend the Quran because they didn't know. They didn't know. They didn't know how to respond. They didn't even know the facts or the lack thereof, that this person was spewing. They didn't know how to address them. They didn't even know if the Quran really spoke this or said these things. So it's very important to protect yourself and to defend Islam that you learn Uloom al-Quran. Another example, this is a more recent example. We were praying Taraweeh at one of the centers, and one of our mashayikh, Allah yajzih khair, has a very beautiful recitation in different qira'at, and he elected to go with a different qira'at. The next Taraweeh, people bombarded me and started to complain and say, we were getting a lot of complaints about the qira'ah yesterday. What was that? They went home, parents went home, and their kids were complaining. They didn't understand how the reciter was changing the Quran, if it was even Quran. And the fact that the parents didn't know how to respond to their parents is even more concerning. The fact that people didn't know that you could recite the Quran in different ways that are all authentic, mutawatir, and meet all the conditions to the qira'ah that we're all familiar with is concerning. So this exists in our own community, in our own homes. So it's very important to equip ourselves with these things to, again, protect your hearts, right? Shaitan will find any way to get in and And of course, I had to go to our beloved Sheikh and say, just go back to Hafsan Asim, please, and let's avoid these complaints. So may Allah forgive us. So increasing one's iman or belief, and of course, the one I kind of spoke about, which we'll talk about inshallah in the last class, is the miraculous nature of the Quran and appreciating that miraculous nature. That actually it's a beautiful topic. It's one of my favorites. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كِتَابٌ أَنزَلْنَاهُ إِلَيْكَ مُبَارَكٌ لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ وَلِيَذَّكَّرَ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ, or وَلِيَتَذَكَّرَ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ in another qira'ah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed a blessed book so that you can contemplate its verses, and so that you may be reminded for those who seek reminders, or ulul albab. Okay? Any questions on why we're covering Uloom al-Quran? All right. I apologize in advance for the formatting. I think this is when you go from PC to Mac. But the notes, inshallah, that are in PDF format, our PDFs don't get kind of reformatted, should be standard. So, by the way, you will have access to the PDF format of the lecture notes before the class, so that you don't have to, worry about writing every word. The notes will be with you. If you wanted to add to them your personal notes, that'll be easier, inshallah ta'ala. Does anybody have access to the notes right now? Okay. Okay. So we'll make sure they were already available before. I don't think they were uploaded. So inshallah, we'll make sure we're uploading them beforehand. All right. Let's talk about the history of Uloom al-Quran. How did it evolve as a science? So, did the Prophet ﷺ gather the Sahaba, sit them down in a circle, and teach them about Uloom al-Quran? No. Anybody disagree? Did the Prophet ﷺ grab the Sahaba, sit them down, and teach them tajweed? No. How come? Why are we learning this then? Why is there such thing as Uloom al-Quran if the Prophet ﷺ didn't do it? Yes. So you're right. So there was no need at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The Quran was being revealed basically live stream, right? In real time. And so when it was revealed, nobody had to ask, is this Madani or Mecca? Well, you're in Mecca, right? You're at a time of Mecca. Nobody even knew that there was going to be a time of Medina. And when you're in time of Medina, well, you knew that was an earlier verse in Mecca versus Medina, as an example, right? So they were living it as it was revealed. And so there was no need for this science. And, sorry, what's your name? Sulaiman. As Sulaiman mentioned, really the Sahaba went to the Prophet ﷺ to ask him questions when it pertained to meanings, to get elaboration, clarification on what the ayats meant. So it was more of like a tafsir. It wasn't necessarily a formal class, it was more of a question and answer. But that's where it was initiated, that there was a dialogue between the Sahaba and the Prophet ﷺ pertaining to the Quran, mainly its meanings, right? And so, an example, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَلَمْ يَلْبِسُوا إِيمَانَهُمْ بِظُلْمٍ أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمُ الْأَمْنُ وَهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. That when this ayah was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba got nervous. The ayah says, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَلَمْ يَلْبِسُوا إِيمَانَهُمْ بِظُلْمٍ. Those who are faithful and do not tarnish their faith with falsehood, بِظُلْم, oppression. أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمُ الْأَمْنُ وَهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. That those are the people who are going to be secure and guided. So they were concerned because they realized we all oppress in one way, shape, or form. Does that mean we're all going to tarnish our iman with our oppression? And the Prophet ﷺ, when they asked him what this ayah means, he said, the Prophet ﷺ said that no, this is talking about shirk, right? You can tarnish your faith with committing shirk. So there was this dialogue when it came to meanings when the Sahaba didn't understand. So that's where kind of the onset of this relationship to learn more about the Quran came from, right? But there was no classes, there were no gatherings to talk specifically about, tajweed or how to recite. They were taught to memorize, and these are the ayat, and Sahaba memorized them, but nothing like this that covered this topic in its current comprehensive form. Came afterwards, of course, the Sahaba came and they kind of took the lead in communicating what they learned from the Prophet ﷺ, and then the Tabi'een came. But of course, the successors of the Tabi'een, they studied eagerly under the Sahaba, and basically the Sahaba, a few, there's several, but the Prophet ﷺ actually called out the names of specific Sahaba for their knowledge about the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ said, خذوا القرآن من أربع من عبد الله بن مسعود, one, وسالم and Mu'adh وأبي bin Ka'b. So those four Sahaba. Take Quran from them. And of course, there was also, I don't have the time to kind of go into the detail of each of the Sahaba, but what we'll talk about is kind of how things expanded just because of time. And also Abdullah ibn Abbas, right, the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ asked or made dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant him understanding of the religion and teach him the interpretation, right, of the Quran, ta'wil. And so these Sahaba took it upon themselves to teach others about the Quran, particularly obviously the meanings and the recitation. And so these Sahaba didn't stay home and say, I've learned, let people come to me and learn. They actually spread across the Arabian Peninsula to communicate this knowledge to others. And so Abdullah ibn Abbas, for example, stuck around and he went to Mecca, but he had students that learned under him, right? In Medina, you had Ubay bin Ka'b, who stayed in Medina, who taught students in Medina. In Kufa you had Al-Hasan al-Basri, he went, as well as Abdullah bin Mas'ud. So if they didn't go, their students went there. And so they started to teach others around these topics that will kind of bring all together under one umbrella. So there was no writing at the time of this topic of Uloom al-Quran. Everything was oral, right? The Quran, even for the most part, it was written at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, but it wasn't compiled into one manuscript until Abu Bakr's time as a Khalifa, and then afterwards, Uthman's time, when it was standardized. And by the way, we'll talk about all of that, inshallah, as part of this course of how the Quran was preserved. But initially, it started with the oral transmission, and these topics, pertaining to tafsir and what things meant, it was all communicated orally. The level of knowledge was high and didn't need to write these things down until, over time, people pass and that knowledge becomes lost, right? And so it's interesting, actually. The first ayah that was revealed was Iqra, right? So Iqra, by the way, means more than read. But one of the meanings is that read, right? So you recite the Quran, right? What's the second instance, the Quran? What was revealed from the Quran? Yeah, there's difference of opinion, but there's one that says that Surah Al-Qalam, Noon wal qalami wa ma yastur. It's interesting that it's qalam, right? Qalam, because that's the tool they use to preserve knowledge, right? So Quran came orally and in written form to be passed down. But initially it was all oral because you didn't need to write things down because everybody kind of understood. But when there started to be, and we'll talk more about this for Quran specifically, issues with people passing or people messing things up or reading things in the wrong way, there needed to be a step back and say, listen, we need to do something to preserve this. So the first topic, as we mentioned, was tafsir. That was the first and foremost of the topics to be written down. And there were early accounts of tafsir. Sufyan al-Thawri is one of the earlier tafasir. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Muhammad bin Jarir al-Tabari, right? The al-Tabari tafsir that that actually it's a classical that it still lives on till today, because a lot of these earlier forms of tafsir that were written started to become lost. But certainly some of them made it to us, and by the 2nd and 3rd centuries after Hijrah, the Islamic scholarship expanded into, again, written form, and al-Tabari was one of the forefathers in terms of the, writing down tafsir and collecting the statements of the interpretation of the verses of the Quran. So I've listed some here. I'm not going to go into detail on each one of them. We normally, know them. I would encourage you to read more about them. But in terms of for the examination, as long as you know who they are and what they did and what their books are, or their text was, that's fine by me, inshallah ta'ala. So I won't go into too much over that just because I only have 14 minutes. And so the Quran sciences evolved from tafsir, and from tafsir there needed to be a study of topics like asbab al-nuzul. So, they talk about this tafsir. And by the way, this knowledge it wasn't new. It was already in ahadith, in texts. Scholars basically collected them and compiled them into a topic, right? That was focused on that subject, versus trying to look through tafsir or hadith books, because you'll find them. A lot of them are narrations of a hadith. But it's difficult to kind of navigate and go through and collect. So it was done for us by the scholars. So there's books about asbab al-nuzul, books about qira'at, the i'jaz of the Quran, and so on. And so that's kind of how it started to evolve. It started with tafsir, and it started now to basically branch off into other topics that supported the tafsir. And so some of them are here listed. What I think would be important that you know some of these scholars. So I mentioned Sufyan al-Thawri. I think it's also worth learning, of course, about Imam al-Tabari as the judge, and Shu'bah ibn al-Hajjaj. I think that's important. Look up their legacy, look up their background and their books and what they entailed. I've listed them here in Arabic and in English if you want to look at them. Again, they each talked about a specific topic that is derived from tafsir. So sciences of the qira'at and nasakh al-mansukh. Nasakh al-mansukh is abrogation. Ta'wil, mushkil al-Quran, i'rab al-Quran, which is the miraculous nature of the Quran. I'rab is the grammatical analysis of the Quran, and i'jaz is the miraculous nature of the Quran. So there's many books, and again, Sahih Bukhari and Muslim included a lot of this content that was compiled into these books. So then over time, scholars began to say, there's a lot of this knowledge about the Quran, we need to put this all together. And so the work started to basically move towards this topic as an umbrella term called the Uloom al-Quran. So there was a copy of Al-Hawi fi al-Quran, Uloom al-Quran, which actually is by Abu Bakr Muhammad bin Khalaf, that is non-existent. It's been lost. The earlier classical literature that still exists today, but one of them is actually not in its complete form, is Al-Burhan fi Uloom al-Quran, and that's essentially by Zarkashi. And then also the As-Suyuti does the Itqan. It's also a classical form of the topic. These two books by Zarkashi and Suyuti are covered in the advanced class that we will, inshallah, if we have the ability to offer in the new year. They go into a little bit more kind of classical, deeper topics that we will cover, inshallah ta'ala. There's also contemporary topics, contemporary books that are available. So Manahil al-Irfan is more of the 20th century book by Zarqani. It takes from both Al-Burhan and Al-Itqan. and it modernizes it. So it's really good. So a lot of what we cover in the advanced class comes from that book, Manahil al-Arfan. So inshallah ta'ala, we will cover those in more detail. Okay, so that is Uloom al-Quran and how it's evolved into becoming its own kind of general, comprehensive topic. Sciences that pertain to the Quran are covered. Okay. In the 10 minutes we have, I'm going to try to cover at least some of this, as this is now getting into the content, inshallah ta'ala. So, what is the meaning of the word Quran? So it's derived from the word qara'a, right? To read or recite, right? So one opinion is that the Quran is a verbal noun. So the noun form of a verb. And what we call in Arabic al-masdar, okay? So it's the verbal noun of qara'a. What's the verbal noun of qara'a? Or to read in English? Or to recite. Reading, right, reading or the recitation. It's not a verb, it's now become a noun, right? You've taken a verb, made it into a noun. So recite, the recitation, okay? So there's an opinion that the word Quran means the recitation, and it's based on, obviously, evidence from the Quran. إِنَّ عَلَيْنَا جَمْعَهُ وَقُرْآنَهُ فَإِذَا قَرَأْنَاهُ فَاتَّبِعْ قُرْآنَهُ, right? So it's for us to collect it and recite. We have recited it, so follow its recitation. Other opinions that the Quran comes from the word root qarana. What does qarana mean? Anyone know? It's to join or associate. You know Hajj Qiran? Hajj Qiran. Has anybody done Hajj Qiran? Most people do Tamattu. Has anybody done Qiran? Does anybody know what Hajj Qiran is? Okay, that's when you combine Umrah and Hajj together so you don't break your ihram in between. So you combine them. Qiran comes from Qarana, to combine. Some scholars have said the Quran comes from that word. Yes? Correct. Qareen is associate. Very good. Excellent. Right? That's one also opinion. Also, qara'in is another opinion. It comes from the word qara'in. What does qara'in mean? I think you kind of said it already. To resemble, right? To be similar to, right? So the Quran is composed of ayat that aid one another in comprehension. Okay? That the surahs resemble each other in beauty and prose, support each other. There's also an opinion and that based on actually Imam Shafi'i, that Quran is a proper noun. It doesn't have a meaning. Just like Al-Injil and the Torah. What's the meaning of Injil and what's the Torah? There's no meaning. It's a proper noun. And there is an opinion that it is a proper noun. So there's no meaning for the word Quran. The Quran is the Quran. It's the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? The strongest of all these opinions is the first one, coming from Qara, the recitation. Okay? So just to give you a kind of just different perspectives. All right? So what is the definition now of the Quran? So there's no difference of opinion when it comes to what the Quran is, but there are several definitions, and they're just different really in wording, but they capture the essence. Okay? Here I've taken this one from Manahil al-Arfan, the book I referenced earlier that we'll cover inshallah in the advanced class, by Zarqani, that the Quran, and I've highlighted different components because we're going to cover each one of those. The Quran is the Arabic speech of Allah, Kalamullah, which He revealed to Muhammad ﷺ, in wording and meaning, and which has been preserved in the Mus'haf, the Mus'haf, okay? And it says, I know it says the Mus'hafs, but forgive me there, and has reached us by mutawatir transmission and is a challenge to mankind to produce something similar to it. Comprehensive definition of what the Quran is. Okay? We're going to talk about each of these. I'm going to break them down, inshallah. So let's talk about the first one. The Arabic. It's the Arabic speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكَذَلِكَ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا. Right? it implies that the Quran is in the Arabic language. It's clear, right? And there's actually 11 references in the Quran that refer to it as Quran Arabi, Arabic Quran. Now, it's very important to note, some scholars, based on the narrations of the companions, claim that there are words in the Quran that are not Arabic though. So, for example, tur is actually not derived from an Arabic word, it's Syriac. Tafiqa is actually Roman. Hudna is Hebrew. So, if it's Arabic, how do we have words that are not Arabic in the Quran? Okay? You see, this is why it's important to learn, right? Because questions like this will be asked, and then how do we answer? Sometimes it can even lead to doubts in our minds. May Allah protect us. So, As-Suyuti actually compiled a list of over 100 words in the Quran that were claimed to be non-Arabic in origin. Okay? Other scholars like Shafi'i denied this claim, and based on the verses in the Quran, like this one that I showed here, that everything in the Quran is Arabic, because the Quran is completely Arabic. So how do you reconcile the two? They're not contradiction, by the way, because the opinion that both of these accounts are actually true, that these words came from a foreign language earlier on into the Arabic language and became part of the Arabic language when the Quran was revealed. Okay? So sometimes words, I mean language, you can study how languages kind of develop, how they're created and developed over time, right? Whose time was Arabic kind of the first people to speak Arabic? Does anyone know? Yeah, Sayyidina Ismail alayhi salam, right? Sayyidina Ismail alayhi salam was the first time that generation in Mecca is where really Arabic became a language. And of course, it led all the way. This is why, the Prophet ﷺ comes from Sayyidina Ismail's lineage, right? So words were adapted, they were brought into the language, and they started to be used, and so it became really Arabic, right? Even though their origin was foreign, they're still considered to be Arabic. And that's the accepted opinion, and the strong opinion. Yes?
So does that mean that, for example, the word nur that was at that time when the Quran was revealed, it was still used for a mountain?
Yes. Yes. Now there are words that their derivation did not mean much to people. They didn't understand what they meant. So, for example, this concept of this word of tawakkul. If you asked people at the time of the Prophet before they understood what was revealed, if you asked them what is tawakkul, people would have not known. What is tawakkul? We don't know. We know wakil, but we don't know what tawakkul means. Wakil is somebody who you entrust, right? The word tawakkul is actually a term that is Islamic, that came with the message of the Quran, right? It didn't have a meaning before. So sometimes Quran came to give a meaning to something that's different than what people understood. It could have been a new form of the word too, right? That's not to say that, there are some words that the Sahaba didn't know how to explain, right? We know this, that Abu Bakr radiallahu anh would read ayat, especially for example in Surah Al-Mutaffifin, right? وَمِزَاجُهُ مِن تَسْنِيم. What is tasneem, right? There's tafsir, but there's no actual, this is what tasneem is, right? So there are words that are not even widely used at the time that were used in the Quran. Okay. The next part of it, and we'll wrap up inshallah in just maybe in this slide, and maybe one more inshallah ta'ala, is that Quran is the speech of Allah. So the speech of Allah, that means He spoke in a manner that befits Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that means it excludes all speech that comes from anybody else, including the Prophet ﷺ. Okay? Unless the Prophet ﷺ recited it and said, this is what that Jibreel taught me, right? Then it wouldn't be Quran. And we're going to talk about the difference between Hadith Qudsi and Quran, by the way, inshallah. Which was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, so it excludes any other speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He spoke to any other Prophet. Right? that's ruled that out. There's nothing, if it wasn't delivered to the Prophet ﷺ, it's not Quran. And we know that people after the Prophet ﷺ claim prophecy as well, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِنَّهُ لَتَنزِيلُ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ نَزَلَ بِهِ الرُّوحُ الْأَمِينَ عَلَى قَلْبِكَ عَلَى قَلْبِكَ لِتَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُنذِرِينَ That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed this revelations from the Lord of the worlds, all the worlds, communicated by the trustworthy spirit, which is Jibreel alayhi salam, brought to you, to your heart, O Prophet of Allah salam, so that you become a warner. And we'll end with this slide, inshallah. Is this the last one? Yeah. And in wording and meaning. So this affirms that the words of the Quran are only from Allah and excludes Hadith Qudsi, which we'll kind of compare with the Quran next week, inshallah, which has been preserved in the Mus'haf. What is the Mus'haf when we say the Mus'haf? What is the Mus'haf? Does anyone know? Yeah, Sayyidina Uthman, right? The standard copy of the Mus'haf. Again, we'll cover that, inshallah. Sayyidina Uthman ordered to be kind of standard and burn all the other copies so that there is no doubt and confusion about any differences, so that there are no differences. So it excludes ayat that were used to be part of the Quran but were abrogated, right? We'll talk about what abrogated means later, okay? Abrogation is, very quickly, is when ayat were revealed and they supersede ayat that came before them in meaning and in text. Okay? Again, we have a topic for that, inshallah. And has reached us by mutawatir transmission. What does mutawatir mean? This is extremely important. What does mutawatir mean? Yes? Not just verbal, right? Yeah, so many people directly teaching other many people, directly teaching, and I say directly because it's direct, there's no gap. Many other people, such that the probability for people to make the same mistake becomes zero. It's impossible. If there was somebody to make a mistake in the Quran, and if it's ahad, which is the other form of transmission, which means one or a few people, right? Is there a likelihood that the same 3 people, for example, can make the same exact mistake? Sure. Right? Sure. The odds of that they're very low, but it could happen. But when I tell you thousands upon thousands, tens and hundreds of thousands of people over time learn the Quran, and all of them in different geographies, in different even times, come together and say, we're going to change this, and we're all going to memorize it this way, and we're going to keep it this way. The possibility of that is impossible. Right? So mutawatir is extremely important as a condition for accepting, of course, the Quran as authentic and original. So nobody can, by mistake or intentionally, forge a lie. Some readings, by the way, of the Quran, the qira'at, did not pass down mutawatir. So those are rejected. Okay? Those are rejected. Only the ones that are mutawatir are accepted. And we'll talk about that too, inshallah. Challenge to mankind to produce something similar to it. The Quran has ayat at-tahaddi, the verses of challenge to produce something like it. That's the definition of, that has to be in the definition of the Quran, since it does not remove anything that should be not part of the Quran. And it's essential because it mentions that there's a miraculous nature to the Quran that nobody can reproduce. Okay? Those are the main elements of the definition. Know the definition well, inshallah, and what makes the Quran so special. Next week, inshallah, we will continue and we'll talk about the different names and characteristics of the Quran. And then, inshallah ta'ala, we will go into more depth, given this is just the first class. Any questions or comments or concerns before we close? Okay. Yes. Yes, please. Sign up first and take the book. We'll have them available for next week too, inshallah. Just because, so I can try, because you have to be a credit student to take them. That's the incentive to become a credit. Yes. Yes, there's no responsibility. I just ask you to, attend for your own benefit and stay for the entire time. For credit, there's assessments, there's assignments, and attendance is mandatory. Okay? If you happen to miss a class because there's no way you can make it for whatever reason, you're traveling, you're ill, there's something going on that's difficult, please let me know, and we will get you access to that class, the recording, inshallah. Yes? They should be up, inshallah, before the class. I'll make sure that these slides are going to be available to you as soon as possible, inshallah. Okay, with that, جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.